Okay, so it's recording.
So here's a gavel.
Ouch!
Call to order the Warrenville Public Library District Library Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 20th, and it is 6:03 p.m. So this is a virtual meeting. I know that you all know we have Director Whitmer on the line and several other staff members. Is there any public, Sandy?
I cannot tell that.
All right, and then we also have, as we've heard, Jackie Davis, the administrative assistant to our director. So I'd like to make a roll call now of the trustees. Trustee DeRocher.
Here.
Trustee Lazan is not present. Trustee Richardson.
Here.
Trustee Ritzika.
Present.
Trustee Stoll.
Present.
Trustee Warren.
Online, present.
And Trustee Pika is also online. So that said, Sandy, do you need to call out the staff or is Jackie able to pick that up?
I'll be able to record it for Jackie.
Okay. So with that said, since you can't seem to determine there are no public present.
I can only see that there are staff present right now.
Okay, so then we will move on to the first draft of the fiscal year 21 working budget. You received that in your packet that was mailed to you, as well as a cover sheet. I think perhaps the best thing to do before we entertain random questions is have Sandy go through it with us. Perhaps she's willing to take questions on individual pages as we go through it, or would you prefer to hold them till the end, Sandy?
How about, I think if I can I'll stop after each section or each kind of bullet point.
Okay.
And that notes page, and maybe that will help. We'll ask for some guidance there or questions if you have any questions about a particular section.
All right, so we'll turn it over to Director Whitmer.
Okay. So I will start out by just saying at the top of here, the top of the notes sheet, I've recommended some pay adjustments, and I'll get into them in a little bit of detail in a minute. So that's something that I just need a little direction from you on when we get to that part. Maybe you can share your thoughts with me and see we can come up with a solution to that together or a good alternative. The second thing that I think is really important for people to understand is that there is a potential for the late arrival of property taxes for our district this year. And that's because of a law or a rule that was passed by the county board that allows people who have been impacted by the pandemic to apply for basically an extension or a waiver of the late fees for a late payment of their property taxes. It allows people to pay their taxes that were due June 1st, anytime up to September 1st without incurring the usual late fees that would be applied. And basically what's expected to happen then is people who qualify for that late fee waiver will take those 3 months to pay their June 1st property tax payments. So that means that it basically has a potential to delay up to 60% of our revenue from that first property tax payment. We did receive our first deposit from that property tax, the June 1st payments. Probably people who receive their bill on May 1st or shortly thereafter and just want to get it off of their table, so they immediately send in that payment. Last year, that mid-May payment brought in $36,000 for us. This year, that mid-May payment was just $16,000.
Oh boy.
So I'm not, it definitely shows something. I'm not sure that that's a trend that's going to continue through the whole first 3 months that those payments are due. I think when we get our June payment, it's still going to be less than we're expecting, but it shouldn't be quite as drastic as this, which is basically, I don't know, pretty drastic.
Yes.
But we do have enough cash in our accounts that we can cover like up to 60% loss of those or a delay in those payments. However, we all just need to be aware that if there is any kind of an extension of that fee waiver, or if for some reason they add another fee waiver for the September 1st payments that are due, that could impact us pretty significantly. So my job in this sort of case is to really closely monitor our cash flow and make sure that we don't need to take any interim steps to reduce expenditures kind of on a short-term basis, to make sure that we don't basically run out of cash or have a need to borrow cash to plug a gap in that income flow. So that's an interesting situation that honestly I have never encountered before. So it's just something that, just so you know, I will be monitoring it, and I'll keep you posted. When those property tax payments come in, that's probably an email I'll send to you. Hey, you know, the next payment came in and this is how much it was. This is how much it was last year. So we have kind of an idea of what we're looking at. Is that helpful to everybody?
Very
If I
good.
could just ask you to, if
Sure.
it's possible for you to give us a percentage of what we're expecting, you know, like what does $16,000 represent in a percentage? And then for the June payment, what percentage would we have collected at that point?
Well, I have on my note paper that $16,000 is about 45% of what we received at the same time last year.
Okay. And
So-
that's how much percent of what we expect of the total?
That's where I think you were
Oh,
going.
okay. I can note that. I haven't noted that, but I'll
Okay.
share that.
Sandy, we get the payments in May, June, July?
Yes, and then usually September, October, November.
Okay.
Now this, say we should, Sandy, dip into the, this cash fund that you've got that can tide us over for a certain amount of time. We get money back in. Would that go to replenish that, in effect, self-borrow, or is that something that would just be absorbed into current activity instead of parceling it back to what we've taken out?
Right. So what I see happening, and this is what we did when I first joined the library and there were some deficits in our corporate fund, we simply allowed the financial reports to show a deficit in the corporate fund. And we allowed the cash on hand, which was in some other funds like the working cash fund, to just carry us through that deficit period, so that when the money does come in, we just apply it to the corporate fund where it belongs and replenish and then overcome that deficit spending.
All right, thank you.
That seems to be the simplest way to do it. Otherwise, the transfers require resolutions, and our accountant and auditors were okay with that when we did that back then.
All right.
Okay. All right. So that's the, I don't know, not so good news. Some other income notes, just so you're aware. Our property tax extension increased $40,000 over last year. We had a little bit of a higher consumer price index last year, so that allowed us to capture a little bit more money. The extended use fees on the income sheet we've zeroed out because it's our intention to bring a policy to the board in June that would allow our library to become a fine-free library effective July 1st. So
Wow.
that basically has reduced income by $18,000 to $20,000. So that's there, and Jamie Perpich is and her team are working to study what those policies need to be. Our interest income, as you all probably know, I should probably put a 0, a big fat goose egg in that line, but I left a little bit there.
Optimistic.
But of course, those rates are down considerably. So we had a nice little short period of time where we did get some halfway decent income from our interest, but that we will say farewell for a bit. And then the last thing I basically took out of the income is the per capita grant. Based on the state's situation at this time. I'm not confident that we're going to see per capita grant money, so I just simply took it out of the budget. When we do our budget and appropriation ordinance, certainly we can put money in so that if we, put money into that budget appropriation, so that if we do by chance get the per capita grant money, we can still spend it. But in terms of just our working cash budget, I thought it was the wisest decision just to leave that grant money out of the equation for a more realistic view of what things would probably look like for us.
And last year that was about 13,000.
It's closer to 17,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a nice chunk of money, and we typically use it. I typically say it goes toward our newsletter and some of our publicity, but we can cover those costs, I think, out of our operating funds. Okay. Any questions on income?
The per capita grant is sort of just like found money, right? I mean, it's not anything that you can really count on until you actually get the check.
That is correct. That's a good way to put it. Yes. And right now we're waiting on per capita grant money, I think from last year. So it's been. I
thought you got a check and you were surprised to get it.
We didn't get a check for per capita grant money this year.
That was the levy, I
in this
think.
fiscal year. It may have been last year's money that arrived in this year. So.
Okay.
I'm
I'll
just
take money whenever you get it.
Right. And we're not in a situation where that is paying for things like our electricity or staff salaries. So
sure.
I think we're okay compared to some other libraries that really depend on that for some crucial expenses.
So
Okay.
I have one
Yes.
question on the income. Again, the hotel motel tax grant, do we know anything on that yet?
You know what? If you ask me about that during the regular board meeting,
Oh, okay.
I can, or if you want, I can speak to it now. The city actually discussed the hotel motel grant process on Monday night at their council meeting, and they approved kind of an agreement that they would allow the Tourism and Arts Commission to review any requests for reimbursement. And for those of us who cancel events that are scheduled before July 31st, of course, that could be extended. The council could extend that. But any of those events that were canceled before July 31st, sorry, somebody's texting me. The things that were canceled before July 31st, we can put in a reimbursement, and the Tourism and Arts Commission will consider paying us, especially if we had a contract issued for somebody. So that's a possibility.
Okay.
And I did talk today, I was working with the person we book our concerts through, and we're looking into canceling the June concerts and rescheduling them actually for September, with a little bit of hope that we might be able to have them at that time. That hasn't been publicly announced, but I guess I'm announcing it now. But we'll work on some publicity once we know for sure that we have dates scheduled for September.
That issue seems almost like the per capita grant, that hotel motel, nobody's traveling. So how would they get any kind of fee out of that, or any kind of revenue?
I think that they've budgeted based on their fund balances that exist right now. I have a feeling that we'll see some changes to that program next year. Because I think the income from the hotels over the coming, 8 to 12 months is really going to be hit hard. So I think we'll see some significant changes next year. I have a feeling they will be encouraging us to find other sources for to fund those events.
That one will be a goose egg next year.
It could be. It could very well be. All right. So any other questions about income or concerns or contributions? Okay. So expenditures. The first item here, and this is where I need a little bit of input from you regarding our salaries, our IMRF, and those types of benefit payments. So I've reviewed basically where all of our employees are on our wage scale, the pay grade scale, the wage scale. And there are several people who are really solid performers. And our solid performers should be at the midpoint on that pay grade. So there's a minimum, a midpoint, and then a maximum point. And the people who are doing their job and doing it well should be closer to the midpoint. So we have some people that fall really low on this scale. And I would like to, if possible, bring them up to the midpoint. And this budget reflects that happening. So there are actually 20 employees who would be affected by that type of an increase. And their increases would range from 50 cents all the way up to $2.75 an hour. And there are 3 of our managers who would also receive adjustments under that plan. The employees who would not be impacted by those parity adjustments would instead receive just a 2% flat cost of living this fiscal year. So, and there's one person who is at the maximum end of the range. He'd be eligible for 2%, but he wouldn't get the full 2%. So the cost of all of those adjustments is about $42,000, which is 3.7% more than the expenditures in the year that we're in now. So I've kind of laid out a couple of options. I don't know of many libraries that are giving pay increases at this time due to the pandemic and due to the uncertainty of some of our income. So I've laid out just a few options for you to consider. One would be to implement the plan. As I've stated, we would do the parity adjustments and 2% wage increases for everybody, beginning with the first full pay period in July. The second option would be in that first full pay period, we could implement a 2% wage increase across the board for all employees. That would just be a cost of living increase. We wouldn't have any merit increases at that time. And then those parity increases could be implemented mid-year. So in the first pay period in January. And by that time, we would know a little bit more about what's happening with our income.
And would those be retroactive in your mind?
I don't think that they would be retroactive.
They would
I
just
think
start at that moment.
Right.
Okay.
That's a great question. Another option is just to simply implement a wage freeze. Nobody gets any increase this year, and we'd revisit this for 1 year from now. And then D, which is very similar to B, is to implement a temporary wage freeze, which would go through January, through the first pay period in the next fiscal year. And then we would revisit the wages in November, December. It's very similar to the second option there. I don't know, it's just that D, we would revisit it. We wouldn't say today, hey, we're going to pay everybody 2%, and on January 11th, we're going to implement those parity increases. With D, we would revisit it in November, December, see where we're at, and see if we could afford to do those other increases.
The one question I had is, how is this with getting the employees to, say, the $15 minimum wage that we're supposed to be working towards? So I don't know, is that covered with, you could say, helping with the 2% increase, or is that part of the parity adjustment?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Right now, I believe that everybody is being paid at a rate that's sufficient to carry us through. Okay, I can't find that sheet now, of course. I think it's sufficient to carry us through, oh, here it is. Sorry. So as of January 1st, 2021, the minimum wage is going to be $11. We do not have any employees even at this time who are making less than $11 an hour. I don't think. I could be wrong. But if I am wrong, the 2% increase would take care of that very easily. With those parity adjustments, we would get people, almost everybody would be up to at least $13 an hour.
Okay.
And that would take us through, the minimum wage is $13 an hour on January 1st of 2023. So we'd be a couple years ahead of that minimum wage law.
Okay.
And when are we supposed to get to $15 an hour?
January 1st of 2025.
Okay. All right.
And
So-
we'd work, I would like to try to stay ahead of that as much as possible. So,
Instead of taking a bigger hit down the line.
right.
Sandy, which number is in the salaries? Which of these options is what you have in the salaries number now, or?
The first one, the full on where we give
Okay.
a parity raises and the 2% increase.
Okay, so either, got it. It answers my question. Thank you.
It's doable.
So
Um,
are you going to be wanting us to make a recommendation of A through D in June or now?
I would like, if possible, to get that now so that I can implement that decision or that recommendation into the budget adjustment that I can bring to you in June.
So are you indicating that we need to make a motion at during this meeting or during our regular board meeting?
You don't have to make a motion. You can just advise me which is the preferred option.
Okay. Comments from the boards?
I really have to say that I feel like I don't think that we can go with A right away. I feel like we need to have a little bit of, we need to kind of wait and see a little. I don't want to go to C. I think that we should revisit it. I definitely don't want to do a whole year of nothing. I definitely don't want to do that. But I think we need to at least wait and see a little bit. So I'm either in the B camp or the D camp.
And I agree with Barbara's statements.
I agree with that as well, that B or D. And I don't know, I'm kind of leaning more towards B myself, just so that there is something.
Can we combine B and D? Is that possible to implement the 2% and revisit it earlier?
Yes, I think that that's probably a good suggestion. So if we implement the 2% wage increase in July for everyone as a cost of living increase, and then in November and December, I can bring back information about where we're at and we can discuss whether or not those parity increases can be implemented in January. Does that sound like a good approach?
Yes.
I'm in favor.
I think so.
I'm
Okay.
in favor. Cindy Rosico.
Great, thanks, Cindy. And I will, but what I will do with the draft of the budget, I will draft the budget as if we are going to do those parity increases, so the money is at least there on paper. And if we have to, if we're not able to do it, then we're not able to do it at that time. But at least we've kind of thought it through.
I'm
Okay.
concerned about the burn rate of the money that's being spent now as opposed to what we're likely to get and how fast we're going to get it in the future. So that if we hold fast to what we've got now, not including 2%, then we have the opportunity to go further while everybody gets more of what they've got as opposed to winding up short and then having to cut hours, cut wages. United went down by quite a bit. And they're as far as hours are concerned, and I'd like to conserve this and maybe retroactively grant these things at a time when we're more certain of what's going to happen. I'm thinking that we're not through this. We haven't gotten a second wave yet. From what I've seen on sunny days, it's like the party's on as far as people getting out, being together, up and down the street. I see all kinds of social activities. And I think we're going to get a really interesting second wave through here. It's going to really have a dent in what we've tried to get done.
Well,
I
my,
have two questions. The first one is, Sandy, what number does a 2% wage increase represent? Because you only said the 46,000 was for 2% and parity.
Right.
What number does the 2% represent?
I will have to calculate that right now.
And my second question, or my second comment is I think we're headed for a pretty darn big recession. And so
Right.
we need to be fiscal stewards for the library so that it can weather that. What are our options if we do grant a 2% wage increase now and we find ourselves in trouble?
It would
Good
be
question.
either furloughs or layoffs. That would be the next option.
Can we reduce their income instead of furloughing or laying off?
I
No.
think that's a possibility. Yes, you can
Oh.
reduce pay.
I almost think it's worse to give something and then take it away, as opposed to not giving it at all and then can make up for it at some future time. If we've got a goal of this $13 an hour in January 23, we can advance that, make up for it.
Then maybe we should look at option D then and do the temporary wage freeze until January. And then we'd have an even better idea at that point.
That will allow more hours to be paid just as a absolute amount. So how you divvy it up is meaning each person gets to work longer at the rate that they're working at now, either hours or money.
I'm sorry, what was Jill's suggestion? Could you repeat, either Jill or Sandy, could you repeat that?
Combination of B and D.
My suggestion was implementing the 2% wage increase and revisiting, I guess, the parity earlier than just January.
Okay, so it is a little bit of a variation on B.
Right,
Okay.
B and D kind of together, yes. But
I just
yeah.
got confused in the discussion. I'm sorry. So,
what is the effect on staff morale if we did D?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, we could remind them that they all still are employed.
That's true. That is
You know,
true.
We didn't.
There's a lot of people that aren't.
Yes, exactly.
That is true.
I don't, it's so hard to predict what's going to happen, but I think it's going to get worse.
Right.
My fear is that starting next fall or winter, that's when we're going to see that second wave. If just like with the flu season, that is worse in the fall and winter months. That this could have another. We could head towards another shutdown at that point. Stay-at-home orders again.
They will compound each other. If you've
Right.
got impaired breathing and ability and resistance for regular flu, the COVID would just leap on top of that and take down more people than it would if they didn't have the flu to begin with, like pneumonia.
so I think we need to gather forces here and give Sandy direction. And I'm hearing, sounds like two things on the table: a total wage freeze, and then I thought in conjunction with that would be revisited in November or December, or a 2% and then a revisit in November or December of the parity. And please, someone correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that was correct.
So we need to give Sandy some direction. Any strong opinions, comments?
Well, actually, I'd like to add a option E in there, and that is a wage freeze until January 2021, and we can revisit it in November or December when we know more, and then potentially we could do the 2% and the parity, or we could just have the same conversation again to see where we're at.
That is D.
That is D.
Yeah.
I
That,
like the idea of D. I like D.
okay.
So that everybody's clear now, this would say there is no wage increase in, I don't know, Sandy, how you do the budget, but there'll be no wage increase until at the earliest January 10th of 2021. And the wage issue, whether it's an increase or parity, would be revisited by the board in November or December. Yes? No? Maybe?
That's what I understood to be.
That's right.
That
I
sounds,
mean, I truly do want to do right by the employees. I really do. It's really difficult to know what it's going to look like. I think we're going to know a lot more by November.
When
Right.
it gets worse, what is the effect in the library? I mean, our income is property taxes. How is that going to be affected when it gets worse?
That's the piece that we don't know. That will impact us if people are not able to pay their property taxes. The property tax income will come to us eventually because it will be either placed as a lien on someone's property when they sell their property, but it could be delayed for quite a while.
Cindy, can you go on mute?
Cindy,
Cindy? No, I don't have any makeup on.
are you? No. We're hearing like an echo back from your phone.
Oh, what should I do?
Is it there now?
No, it's gone.
It's
now.
gone
It's
now.
gone, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
And to
I-
Barbara, to everyone's point about us not knowing and this possibly having a longer impact. Oh, now I hear it. It's
It's not gone.
beyond even this year. This will roll us into next year.
I think we need to ask Cindy to mute her microphone.
I don't know how she does that.
Oh, she can do that on her end.
She's on a phone.
Yeah, she can do it on her phone.
There's a spot on the bottom of the screen that'll say mute.
No,
Yep, she did it.
she did it? All right, good job. Okay. Whew, thank you. I thought she had called us.
And
All
then,
right.
Cindy, if you want to talk, you should just unmute yourself.
You guys are good.
I tend to agree with Barbara's commentary about wanting to do right by the employees, but because there are so many unknowns now, and as you stated, Sandy, our job is to make sure the library is physically sound. I'm not sure entering into a wage increase at this particular point is our best option. And correct me if I'm wrong, I did hear you say that very few other libraries are granting pay raises.
That I've heard, yes. There aren't many employees or employers, I think, who are granting
Yeah.
wage increases.
And
Right.
across the board, not just libraries.
Right.
All right, so are we hearing a consensus for Sandy? Is that the consensus of the board that there will just be a temporary wage freeze through the January 10th, 2021 pay period, and the board will begin revisiting the topic in November?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you all.
And to those staff members who are on the call, sometimes tough decisions have to be made. So,
Okay. The other piece here is that I've recommended a couple of staffing changes, and these come about through, for instance, the resignation of our tech services supervisor. Some of the cost savings from that full-time position, I would like to reallocate amongst some of our existing staff. So I've itemized some of those things there. I would like to propose that our marketing specialist, Kathy Gatus, be promoted to a full-time position. One of our associates be promoted to a librarian. Several of the positions will be consolidated. So that basically means I'm looking at several different job descriptions right now to see if they should be merged, so we have a little more crossover between some departments and some responsibilities. And then there are 6 part-time positions right now that are under the IMRF cap for number of hours that they can work in a calendar year. And I would like to elevate those 6 positions up to IMRF eligibility. That adds a little bit of a cost for us in the long run for IMRF payments. But I think it's a nice benefit for some of these part-time employees to have access to a retirement or a pension.
Mm-hmm.
So that I haven't talked to any of these individuals yet, but it's a process that we would work through, and I'd like to propose those. And that was all included. These were all included in that increase. So I would probably implement these changes somehow in the first quarter of the fiscal year. So maybe some starting in July and then moving forward. Some of these changes have actually already happened. For instance, we have 2 member services clerks who were increased to 30 hours a week, probably about 3 months ago. So some were already implemented in this fiscal year. So I would recommend all of these changes highly, unless somebody really has an objection to that.
Questions for Sandy?
Yes.
Who is it, please?
Oh, questions for me.
Any strong opinions, questions?
I'm in favor of all
Okay.
of these.
Okay. Is there anyone who does not agree that Sandy can proceed with these 4 bullet points?
Is there enough work for these people at this point? Or is this
Probably
something?
not at this point. I would wait until we knew there was a plan for the work.
Okay,
Yes, and we
That's-
have 2 vacant positions right now, more than that, actually. And I don't intend to fill those vacant positions until we know we can, we have work for the person, number 1, and number 2, that we can train them appropriately. So we're leaving those vacancies, and a couple of those positions we had offered to people, so we'll probably be rescinding those employment offers right now.
And I'm pretty sure I heard you say you would not move directly into July on all 4 of these things. They would happen throughout the fiscal year, but you just want the money in the budget to plan for.
Right.
Okay. Anything else for Sandy on that topic? All right, Sandy, if you could continue on expenditures then, please.
Alrighty. Operating expenditures, there's just a few notes there. We plan to do a little more with pre-processed items for tech services. That means that the books would arrive pretty much shelf ready. We'd have to do some work in our catalog with those items. That was a project we had planned for the year we're in now, but we didn't get to it because the manager departed. And then materials processing for circulation, we will need to purchase a stash of library cards next year. And if this recession, whatever we're heading into, is anything like the last time, our cardholder rates and the use of the library will increase. So we will need those new library cards and we will use them, which is wonderful. A sad reason to use them, but we'll be happy to welcome all those new users to the library. Bank fees are increased just slightly because we're doing a little more with the credit card processing and that sort of thing. So we've increased that line a little bit. Any questions about those things? These are pretty straightforward. Furniture and equipment purchases, we've added $10,000 here for possible modifications to our desks. This would be for things like the sneeze guards and that sort of thing that we would physically change some things at our desks, so we're all safe. Automation purchases. Cynthia and the staff have requested some money for replacing some of our mobile devices, possibly purchasing some new items. Again, that's kind of a placeholder. We have to see where we're at and what kind of items we'll be able to safely circulate to people. Probably not a purchase on July 1. From the Special Reserve Fund, it's time for us to replace some of our public computers. There's a possibility with the social distancing guidelines that we may not be able to have as many public computers as we have now. So we've budgeted just to replace half of them. We will probably have to space them out a little more in the areas where they're at. We've also added a little bit of money there for some equipment replacements and additions that may be needed when we move to the SWAN consortium.
Sandy, may I
Yes.
ask a question?
Sure.
Is it your general policy to replace all the PCs at one time, or do you have a staggered schedule that you use to replace the equipment like that?
Typically we replace everything at one time, but we're just recommending that we replace half now.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible, depending on how things go, we replace the other half next fiscal year.
Okay.
We may choose to upgrade our laptops instead so people can use those spread out through the library.
Well,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if that's an option, because even if you had ones in the computer station somehow bolted down, that's probably going to be less expensive as option.
That I'm not sure of. And I think there's some question there about how we check them out now, so that would work.
Right, yeah.
I think we'll learn a lot as we go along.
Right.
Question
Automation. Oh, sure, Rick.
on some of these, on these bank fees, are those at all negotiable with the banks?
Not with the system that we're in. For credit cards, for instance, we use something called Square,
Yeah,
which those rates are just generally, if you use Square, these are the rates you pay.
okay.
And we are such a small business when it comes to credit card use that it would be very difficult for us to negotiate a lower rate.
Okay, I
and we-
thought there were other types of banking fees that were part of that through
There,
the Chase account and things like that. They might be able to come
yeah,
down.
occasionally Fifth Third, well, not occasionally, every month Fifth Third charges us bank fees for some of our accounts.
Sure.
But so far, I haven't checked lately, but so far when we reach out to them, they take those fees off of our accounts for us. That was one of the reasons why they got us as a client to begin with. So they've been flexible up to this point about the fees they charge us and take those off. I think it's simply that more people were using credit cards. So those fees just accumulated a little faster than we thought. Overall, if I go to that page, maybe it's $1,000 at the most. It's not very much.
Speaking of thousands of dollars, I got not that I'm saving that much, but I got a notice from my auto insurance that they're going to rebate some of the premiums that I got. Since the building is not being used, are we getting any rebate off of insurance for those things, for
You know what?
any people or
We
liability?
still have to insure the building.
Yeah,
Well-
I will ask. I have to meet with our insurance broker probably in the early part of June. But I'll ask about that. That's a good question, Rick.
And the furniture that you're going to be installing, the sneeze guards and everything like that, is that going to be permanent, I would think?
Not necessarily. Right now, we are looking at ways that Lee, our maintenance person, can construct some things for us that would be temporary that we could set up, take
So like
down.
Hardware and Home Depot, I suppose. Little
Right.
glass
Some 2x4s
by
and sheets
fours
of
and
plexiglass.
Well, I can tell you that as of today, there is no plexiglass
I
in
was
any
just-
hardware store
Oh
or
my goodness.
big
I
box
was just
store.
gonna say, you're not gonna find plexiglass if you don't
Right.
already have it.
And you know what?
It's in the same aisle as the rubbing alcohol and
Yeah.
hydrogen peroxide.
And the Lysol wipes.
And then the computers that you're hoping to swap out, are you going to auction those off?
We typically recycle them, and we have actually been, in the past, we've donated those individual PCs to the People's Resource Center in Wheaton.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
So they've used those.
And
And
then
I will say, back to the sneeze guards, there are libraries that are using clear plastic shower curtains and hanging them around their desks. You can get pretty creative. It's
I
interesting.
like that one. You'll feel
And
like.
I don't expect us to be open to the public until sometime in mid-July or August even. So we'll see if there's a supply
okay.
or not.
And then is there more than what we would ordinarily replace as far as the automation, the computers and printers and everything like that, being required by the SWAN consortium, or are they happy with whatever we've got?
I just finished submitting a grant to the Rails library system. So they will pick up some of the costs. At this point, the only cost for equipment, it's a matching grant basically. It's less than $1,000 worth of equipment that we would have to purchase.
Oh.
There is a possibility that we may need to replace a server. However, that was kind of something that we had already budgeted for this year, I think, that we put off. I'm probably speaking wrong, and Cynthia will correct me tomorrow, but the equipment replacements it's not too
Significant.
yeah, it's not too significant. There are things like a credit card swipe to attach to the PC so we can integrate payments into our catalog or the checkout system. video cameras so we can store photographs of our card holders in the system. So when you come to use your library card, we can actually recognize that it's you using your library card, or even probably verify your identity if you've forgotten your library card. Small, right now it's very small equipment that we're talking about.
But you can add in at least a portion of the server upgrade to the grant request.
No. Oh, Cynthia's texting me now.
Oh.
Cynthia says the only high dollar item would be a new firewall, which was planned for next fiscal year. So it's
So
already
that-
in there. And there are some things that the grant does not cover for us. So
Like the firewall? Like the firewall?
I don't know that. And it's too late for us to add it to the grant. We relied on SWAN. The total grant is over $30,000. So it includes some software, some migration fees, and that sort of thing. So it's not as
The
if,
items listed in the grant request are things they suggested,
yes, that is correct.
which makes it,
The SWAN staff worked with Cynthia to do an inventory of the items that we would need against the items that we already had. And those were the things that they suggested.
so I think they'd probably be more likely to approve it since it's what,
Right.
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Oh, change my page. Okay, so the automation maintenance line again includes some, it's higher than normal because of our migration to SWAN. And this is a line that will probably change between now and next month. It will go down because I budgeted for a full year of maintenance with our current system. And we intend to go on a month-to-month payment with them starting in either August or September. So that will probably cut that amount in half. So we'll see a reduction of, I think, at least $10,000 in that particular line. It was just, I put it in there as a placeholder for the time being.
Would
So
you expect that to go to zero? Cersei Dynex?
Cersei Dynex would go to zero on July 1. I mean, once we're fully migrated to SWAN, it will drop to zero. But in the next year's budget, starting July 1st of 2021, Cersei Dynex will be zero in that fiscal year.
Right.
Okay,
Okay?
Great.
All right. Contractual under accounting, something that we don't do every year, but we will have to do it next fiscal year, is to have a study done by an actuarial accountant for our post-employment benefits. That's a current requirement for us to do every other year. That's not optional. And then library materials budget, the budget, it varied just a little bit. Jerry pointed out to me. Overall, it's about the same as the current fiscal year, but this is one of those places where we're going to have to be a little bit fluid and a little bit flexible, depending on when the library reopens. So for the time that we're closed, we've kind of pulled back on spending for our print materials. We're trying to keep up with the bestsellers and the popular materials because we know we will have waiting lists for those items. But we may need to push a little more money into those online resources and ebooks. So I have included another $10,000 from the Alba Lima's gift fund for ebooks in the next fiscal year. Right now, the spending on those items has doubled over what it has been. So that's going just as we expected.
mhm.
Okay, any questions about any of that I just covered?
Just a question on the Alba Limos gift fund. Is that something that can be replenished? I mean, you use this and then can you put money back into it if you decide that that would be a good place to have some available money for likable things?
That is a fund that was established through an endowment or
Okay.
an estate. That was a person gifted the library money
Okay,
as part of her estate. So I would say, you know, it would be up to the board to decide if we received funds like that at another time, you know, certainly you could decide to establish this type of a fund or just replenish, you know, if this fund is still in existence at that time, you could replenish it.
Okay, because it seems like after a while that would go down to a minimal amount that wouldn't be much use for anything, whereas if you had $10,000 or $50,000, then you
Right.
have something.
And it will be based on another point
Mhm.
that a couple points down. It's going to be almost to zero this
Yeah.
year. So at the end of this proposed fiscal year. So public services is the next item. Again, a lot of these expenses are really dependent on whether or not we're going to be able to offer in-person programs and things. Some new costs that we have are in programming are things like the Zoom subscription that lets us meet and provide programming online. So these lines are budgeted pretty normally, but they might be underspent if in-person programming doesn't happen. That doesn't mean that we won't find other ways to engage people in the community to use those funds. So this is kind of another play it by ear and we'll see what happens. Line item for spending.
So are we adjusting the PR or publicity budget? Like I see there's the parade candy, which of course is not happening. And I don't know if some of the other things were going to be adjusted as well.
Right. So like the parade candy, depending on the year, it gets spent, like we would be buying candy in June and paying for it in June for the July 3rd parade. So we're budgeting for that as if it's going to happen in 2021, that in June of next year, we'll be buying candy for the parade.
Well, you could buy some sanitizing solutions for the parade of people coming through the library.
Right.
Same sort of thing.
So I'm trying to get to that section here. Yeah, so PR and publicity. Yeah, probably like I've put money in for logo apparel. I think when we go back to work in the building, we are probably going to adopt a pretty casual dress code because there's a good chance that when we're open, we will be responsible for, you know, disinfecting tables and that sort of thing. So I can see us adopting a pretty casual, I don't know, dress code. There are still some things that we could give away. We purchase pens for people. There may be other things that we give as promotional items. Like Rick said, if the hand sanitizer supply ever comes up back to what used to be normal levels, maybe that is something that we can give to people. Other than that, in public services, things have kind of, there are a few things that have changed. And printing, we've still budgeted for 4 newsletters, but again, that might fluctuate. Did anybody, I don't know if our little postcard went out, but I hope you saw in your regular board packet.
Yeah, I saw the picture.
Kathy worked with our graphic designer, Molly, to make a nice little postcard to send to people. We
Very
are planning
nice.
to send another postcard in June. So it may be not our full-scale newsletter because it's very difficult for us to plan programs and we don't know what's happening with the pandemic. So we're just planning a couple of informational postcards. And I believe in June, we'll try to send one out that talks a little bit more about our summer reading program.
What is the difference in the cost?
I think Cindy might be trying to speak.
Yeah, I saw she's unmuted. Cindy, did you have something to add?
I wanted to ask how you felt about opening in June, because I noticed and I had read that a lot of libraries are opening in June. How do you feel about the opening?
I think, can we save that for the regular board
Meeting.
meeting when we talk about essential services?
Yes, that's
I can
fine.
answer that then.
Okay,
Great, thanks for asking.
sure.
Oh, let's see. So I don't know exactly what the cost difference is. The postage runs, I don't know. I could bring
Don't
Kathy.
worry. I just thought maybe you know it off the top of your head.
I
Thank
don't.
you.
I don't. Kathy would probably be better, but I don't know if that's necessary to discuss. Okay, the Alba Limos Gift Fund again for public service. So
love this idea.
I do too. I think
Thank
it's
you.
fabulous.
we're changing. So those who are on the call and haven't seen my notes or my packet, we're doing a little bit of a pivot. Those on the call know pivot is becoming my favorite word these days. I hear it everywhere.
It's hot with
And
church
instead of-
leaders too.
I'm
Instead of-
tired of it.
I said it's hot with church leaders too, believe me.
Yes. I tell my staff, I was a big fan of the show Friends. And every time I hear pivot, there's a scene in Friends where they're moving a couch up a stairway that is kind of curved. And they're just yelling, pivot, pivot, pivot. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to want to hear that word again. Anyway, instead of giving out all the little tchotchkes and freebies and coupons that we give to the kids, we've decided to go with something that we're going to call Read for a Cause.
That's just
And for
fabulous.
each reading log, and this is for all ages, so children, teens, adults, for each reading log that you submit, and there will be a way that basically you can just email us or call us, I think, and submit that information. Maybe there's going to be an online form. We're trusting everyone to be just on the honor system. Every time you submit a log, you will have the option to choose from a number of not-for-profit organizations that serve our community. And then at the end of the summer, we will tally those up, and we've allocated up to $2,500 from the Alba Limos Gift Fund to pay out to those community organizations. So we'll see how that goes. The reason I'm using the Alba Limos Gift Fund is simply because that money did not come from our taxpayers, and I'd rather not use taxpayer funds to support these organizations. I don't know that that's really a great idea. So in future years, we could seek out sponsors for this, or people who want to match the reading accomplishments of our community. But we'll try it this year. Other communities have done this very successfully. The organizations that are on board at this point are Literacy DuPage, the Student Excellence Foundation, the Naperville Humane Society, and I know they're not in Warrenville, but they're the ones who bring the dogs that the kids can read to every month. So we wanted to include them. We are trying to bring on neighborhood food pantries, which is the food pantry at Emmanuel Presbyterian. We're having a little bit of difficulty reaching them. And there is a fifth group that I can't remember. Paul, I'm going to turn on your mic.
It's the
Paul, who?
yes, it's the WYFS, Warrenville Youth and Family Services.
Warrenville Youth and Family Services. Yes, thank you. That was an important one. Okay, I'm muting you, Paul. So that's our plan. So I'm glad you
Oh, it's a fabulous plan. Thank
like
you.
that. We'll try it.
Yeah,
We're pivoting. Pivot, pivot, pivot.
just don't pivot too much.
I know. And then maintenance, there's some costs there that are kind of unknowns for us as far as this COVID-19 situation. So, Cindy, do you want to
I
mute
think it's
yourself
Cindy
again?
again.
Thank you. So those are for things like the PPE, the gloves, the masks, the disinfecting wipes, the disinfecting spray, all of that fun stuff that we just really have no idea. And the good news is that we do have access to some of that, and Jackie's been very good at seeking out lots of different places that we can source it. And I did go and support Two Brothers Brewery. I bought 4 gallons of their hand sanitizer. And they've been
Glad you
doing,
clarified sanitizer and not gin.
yes, no, it's pure alcohol. No, 70% alcohol, but I haven't opened the bottles. I don't know what it smells like. It'll be very interesting when we start to use it, but
We'll be
it's
right
there.
over.
Pardon me?
We'll be right over.
Okay. So we are gathering those supplies, so we are ready to do some type of service in June. So that's happening. Okay. Any questions about any of that? Maintenance stuff? No.
Oh,
Telephone is up a little bit. We're adding a second line for internet service so that we have kind of a backup or a secondary pipeline for the new computer catalog. Oh, Sandy Lazan is waiting to get accepted. So let me bring her in. So that increases the telephone expense a little bit. Here she comes.
Okay.
Hi,
No.
Sandy. We're just
Hi,
finishing up
Sandy.
the committee of the whole meeting.
Okay.
Okay. And then the last thing, the debt repayment, I think I might have mentioned this to you at another board meeting. This is how we're balancing the budget. We are, we're going to request a distribution of our developer donation funds that the city is holding for us. And we'll use those to pay the debt,
Make sure they can hear you.
the debt repayment. So
She
the
has to be
principal
muted.
and interest.
Okay.
You're not muted, Sandy.
For 6 to 8 minutes.
You're not muted.
Oh, I'm not?
No,
No,
I
we
just
can hear
wanted you to know.
So that's what's happening with the debt repayment, if everybody's in agreement with that. That allows us to balance the budget. So if you look at the very first page of the budget, this version right now, we have an overall deficit of $3,200. So with the adjustments that we've talked about this month, that will definitely bring us into kind of a positive dollar amount as our bottom line next year.
Okay,
All right.
questions for Sandy? Would you like her to go over any of the individual pages? She's given you a great recap of.
Okay.
While you're thinking, I just want to offer my thanks and my compliments to Sandy for, as usual, providing such a great detailed first round of this budget draft. And I know some of you are. If you're all involved in budgets, it is a roadmap, and I think that Sandy and her team have done a great job getting all the stops on the way to getting the bottom line. So thank you very much, Sandy.
You're welcome.
Sandy.
And I have to thank the management team they gave me all their numbers way back in March before any of this happened, and then things got a little crazy. So they've been very patient with me, and they gave me lots of good numbers to work with. So
thank you, staff, as well.
yes, thank you.
All right, is there any other budget discussion from the board?
Just one question. These two gray columns, I'm not quite sure what the difference between percent change fiscal year 20 projected to 21 and percent change fiscal year 20 budget to fiscal year 21 budget.
Okay, so the very first column that has the numbers are in black print. That is comparing what we're projected to spend in the current fiscal year to what we've budgeted for next fiscal year. It's a projection number. So at the end of the year, it's like comparing, hey, what did we really spend in 2020 to what we're budgeting to spend in 2021? The column with the blue numbers is actually a budget to budget comparison.
Those were helpful numbers, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, it shows where all the big changes are. I'm trying to think of a good place to look. If you look on that very first sheet, if you look at expenditure categories, so the salary line, we'll just take the one top up the top. Our budget for next year is 11% more for salaries than our projection is expected to be, than what we're expected to really spend this year. But right now it's only 6% more, which just doesn't make sense because I've calculated it all out. It's 3.7%, but that's across multiple lines. But it's 6% more than we actually budgeted in the current year. It's
Okay,
just pulling information from different columns.
I see. Okay.
Okay,
All
thanks.
right. So if there are no other questions, then I think what we're doing is directing Sandy to present a second draft of the budget for our meeting next month. Is it the consensus of the board? Do we need, I guess what I'm asking is, do we need another committee of the whole, or does the board feel it can be part of our regular board meeting agenda?
I think it can be part of our regular board meeting agenda.
I agree.
I agree.
Me too.
Okay.
So when you get the board packet next month, you'll want to make sure that you look it over so that when it comes up on the agenda, you are prepared to ask questions or approve it. So be the situation. With that said, I'm going to recommend that we adjourn the committee of the whole. It's 7:07, and before we adjourn, I'm asking this question. Do you guys want to take a 5-minute break, or do you want to just move into the regular board meeting?
I think a 5-minute break would be nice.
I agree.
Okay, so can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move that we adjourn the Warrenville Public Library District Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, May 20th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second,
Who was that, please?
that was Barbara.
Thank you. So motion was made by trustee Stahl and seconded by trustee DeRocher. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to call it 7:10. It's only 7:09, but we will re-adjourn at 7:15 for the regular board meeting. Sandy, can we just leave the screens, or do you want us to log off?